Good afternoon, everybody. Mike Naso from IPR365.com with the latest on Tropical Storm Ernesto, which is finally strengthening and is now almost a hurricane. Of course, we've been watching Ernesto for several days as it rolled right on through the Windward Islands and then seemed to be organizing a lot and became a stronger tropical storm. And then the center completely decoupled and outran the deep convection, and it relocated way in the areas of the Western Caribbean well to the south of Jamaica at a very quick rate. It seemed to jump from the 70 west longitude point to 80 west almost, and it is now organized, consolidated, and is a much better defined tropical storm. As you can see on that looping image, it has outflow channels into an upper low here, one off to the northeast, great outflow to the south, and over the very hot waters, it is now set to become a hurricane probably in the next couple of hours later tonight, and then further strengthening prior to landfall in either Belize or Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It's starting to look a little better for Belize and a little worse for the Yucatan. Nonetheless, both areas at risk from a likely hurricane landfall from Ernesto. Now, the latest on Tropical Storm Ernesto as of the 2 p.m. advisory Eastern Time, it was at 16.2 north, 81.1 west. Winds were 65 miles per hour, gusting to hurricane force. It's very close to becoming a hurricane. It's moving west-northwest at about 11-12 miles an hour, and the pressure was 996 millibars, had been as low as 994. The Air Force has been out there zigzagging all around and has noted it has gained some latitude, and clearly, based on the 11 a.m. track, it is well to the north and east of that track, and if you extrapolate that further north, we would be looking at a track that could potentially keep it much more towards the direction of the Yucatan rather than Belize, and over water for a longer period of time, especially once it gets into the Bay of Campeche here. So there is the likelihood this could approach Category 2 strength at least by the time it makes landfall sometime, say Wednesday morning, and then after that it could get close, if not even achieve hurricane intensity again, and there is more uncertainty with that as time goes by. We do have a hurricane warning for the Yucatan Peninsula, hurricane watch for all of Belize, as the likelihood that this will become a hurricane has increased significantly as the system now is nearing hurricane status as we speak. Here's the latest satellite loop, and you can see clearly a much better defined system right in here. There is some dry air. It looks like it's still trying to organize the center, but it is closing off an eye, and once that happens, strengthening will become more significant as time goes by, especially over the very warm waters. But as the sun came up, a much better defined system than we've ever seen with Ernesto. Finally, we've been waiting to see if this thing would survive or not, and it looks like it has. Here's the infrared. You can see convection burst over the center, and it was very ill-defined, and then over time it just organized into a much better looking system this morning and is now on the verge of becoming a hurricane. Now you can see the track here with Ernesto through time has been one of a little bit of jogs. It was a depression, then jaunted a little to the north, then was a tropical storm and zoomed through the Caribbean, then relocated further to the south and now has zigged back to the northeast. But it is expected to resume kind of a stair-step track here towards the Yucatan Peninsula and then towards Mexico. Here are the model spaghetti model plots, as I've always called them, because it's like one big plate of spaghetti. You never know where these lines will take them. The UK Met does have it moving over the Yucatan and then jaunting to the northwest rather significantly once it gets into the western Gulf. Climatology would say that this would turn towards the North Gulf Coast. However, that does not likely seem to be the case because the ridging over the Gulf will likely remain enough to keep Ernesto down here. Nonetheless, if it's a potent hurricane or even a strong hurricane by the time it makes landfall, it could again be a strong hurricane by a secondary landfall in Mexico. So we're going to be watching this very carefully. You can see the GFDL model brings the system here and then pushes it almost straight to the south before its second landfall. Now here's the latest wind shear, and you can see ideal wind shear right into the direction of Ernesto's path. There is no indication whatsoever this system will have any shear prior to landfall, and the waters, of course, are extremely warm there. It's August, Western Caribbean, low shear, outflow channels, warm water, and a hurricane, it looks like, by later tonight. There is nothing to say this won't continue to strengthen, even at a quick rate, until landfall Wednesday morning. How strong it gets, you just don't know. Hurricane Keith in the year 2000 was in October, and that ramped up from a tropical storm to a Category 4 hurricane. So even though the likelihood of that happening with Ernesto is not quite as high as it was with Keith, you always have to watch out for quick strengthening in this area of the Atlantic Basin. No doubt about that. Now here's tropical cyclone Florence, post-tropical cyclone Florence that had been a tropical storm. 35 miles an hour moving west at 14. We're not going to have to deal with it anymore. It's going to be dissipated by the time Friday rolls around, and that should be it. And when we look at the latest satellite of the Central Atlantic, you can clearly see a very ill-defined weakening vortex out here. A lot of dry air. That might be a problem with Ernesto too. We had a lot of dry air that has affected Florence, and Florence, the remnant, will continue in the low-level flow on off towards the west. Whether it comes back later or not, probably won't be that big of a deal. Now the GFS model we've been watching takes Ernesto into Mexico. However, towards the longer range, it does bring a system off of Africa. You could see it strengthening there into Gordon, that would be Gordon, and then taking a track boom right up towards the east coast of the US and plowing into the east coast, and then this would be Helene behind it. Now of course this is long range, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but it would seem that after Florence moved out, there would be enough ridging to keep this next system moving west and barreling it right towards a threat to the eastern US. So we're going to watch the tropics because it is that time of year. But as of right now, of course, all eyes are on Ernesto, and we will continue to watch it as well. I'm Mike Naso. I will see you next time.